This video shows you how to change a water pump and thermostat in a 3.7 liter Mopar engine. Let's get started. The vehicle I'm using is a 2009 Jeep Grand Cherokee, but this 3.7 liter engine was used in a bunch of Chrysler products at that time. I noticed the vehicle was losing coolant. I did a pressure test and found out that the water pump was leaking. So at this point I made a decision, since I'm already going to drain the system, I might as well change the thermostat on this vehicle as well, so that way it eliminates one other issue happening. The car has a little over 200,000 miles on it at this point, so I don't want to go back and do this job again if I don't have to. First thing we want to do is drain the coolant from the vehicle. If you go on the driver's side, at the bottom of the radiator, there's a petcock. You can twist that and use that to open up the radiator and drain it. Also, make sure everything's cold at this point. You don't want to necessarily be working on everything when it's hot. At the top, there's a radiator cap. You want to take that off as well. And like I said, make sure it's cool so this way you don't get splashed or burned. That will create a vent and allow it to drain quicker. While that's draining, we can go up and look to see what we need to remove. We're going to have to remove the serpentine belt. We're going to have to remove one of these idler pulleys, and obviously the bolts that allow us to remove the water pump. And since I'm doing a thermostat, if you look at the radiator hose that's on the left side, down at the bottom where it meets the engine block, there are two 8mm bolts that we're going to have to remove there to get to the thermostat inside that housing. For this job, we're going to need a 13mm, 15mm, 8mm sockets, and then whatever else we would need as far as a torque wrench if you want to torque it back to spec, razor blade to scrape the mating surface before you reassemble parts, and of course new antifreeze coolant. First thing we need to work on is removing the serpentine belt. Very simple to do, but do yourself a favor and draw yourself a diagram or take a picture of the way the belt is routed, so this way it makes your assembly that much quicker. With our 15mm socket, we want to use force to the right to release the tension and then gently remove the belt. Once the belt's out of the way, we want to remove that pulley that is to the right of the tensioner. Once again, we're going to use the 15mm socket and remove that and get it out of the way. That needs to be removed so we can get to some of those bolts that are on the left side of the water pump. The water pump bolts are all 13mm. Some of them are shallow bolts and some of them are deeper bolts. So just remember which ones are which, so you can put them back in the same spot. Once the 8 bolts from the water pump are removed, you may need to use a little bit of force if the gasket is stuck in order for you to pull straight out and remove that water pump. Now we'll prepare our new water pump for installation. We'll take it out of the box, assemble the gasket. That's pretty simple to do. You'll see there are tabs in this particular water pump where we line up the gasket and push it in. The way this is set up, it'll hold it in place very well, so this way we can reinstall it. Also, make sure that the mating surface on the engine is clean and full and free of any debris. If it's not, we need to prep that. Maybe a little, like I said, a razor blade. Give that a little scrape if there's any gasket material or anything left behind or any oxidization. We want a nice clean mating surface. And once we're done, we'll wipe that off and then reassemble the water pump. To make my life easier, I put the long bolts in, so this way it would help guide them, because the threads on the inside of the engine block don't start till farther on, so it'll help you guide everything into place. And then we're just going to snug all those bolts before we actually go around and torque everything down to the proper specs. Okay, now to remove the thermostat housing. There's an 8mm bolt on the top and bottom of the housing. We will remove those bolts and just use a little bit of pressure pulling straight out, and it should come out. You'll notice that the coil section of the thermostat sticks out of the housing. Around the thermostat there's a rubber gasket. You may need to use a little screwdriver or something to get in there to try to pry that off first to start it, to remove that gasket, and then the thermostat. Once that's removed, make sure everything's clean. Put the new thermostat in the same exact way the other one came out. Make sure the coil part sticks out. There's a little tab up top. You'll see that tab. You want to match your thermostat up with that. That is the area where the blow-by happens if by chance your thermostat gets stuck, so this way some fluid can coke through there even if the thermostat's bad. Make sure the surface where it mates on the engine block is clean. If not, you need to do something to try to remove some corrosion or debris or anything that's there. And then we will put it back together, put the two 8mm bolts in, and we will tighten it up. But this is a very light torque. Okay, we have everything back together. Let's go make sure that we close the petcock on the radiator so we can start adding coolant. Another thing you might want to think about is if you have an Allen wrench, I think it's a size 8, you can remove this little bleeder that's on the return of the engine with the cooling system. That way you don't have to worry about burping the system when you're filling it up with coolant and getting rid of those air pockets. Once everything is full, you'll actually see the coolant come out of that little bleeder, and then we could just reassemble that, put the radiator cap on, and then also make sure we fill our coolant reservoir. We will reinstall the serpentine belt, and now we're ready to start the car and check for any leaks. Okay, I'm all good. I don't see any leaks. You want to run the car for a while and be aware of how much you have in the reservoir, and you may need to add coolant, but in my particular case I didn't need to because I took that bleeder off and filled it that way. I hope that this information helps. I mean, this is a really easy fix for somebody that is trying to save a few dollars or takes pride in doing the job themselves. If this was of value to you, please share, like, and subscribe, and thank you for watching.